Hello, my name is Robbie Fitzwater. I own and operate Marketing Rhythm. We help e-commerce businesses with retention marketing and a lot of email marketing and SMS. So basically, we get questions about emojis all the time. Understanding, hey, when do I use emojis? How do I use emojis? Where do they fit in my emails? Where do they fit in my SMS? When should I use them? When should I not use them? And kind of everything in between. So we're going to walk through this today. We're going to have some fun with it and understand, hey, what's going to be appropriate, what's going to not be appropriate, and honestly, how to leverage this as a way of earning and maintaining attention. So let's dive in. So why use emojis in email subject lines? Basically, like I said earlier, as marketers, attention is hard to earn and harder to maintain. And again, when you're fighting for attention in an inbox, that emoji is going to be a pattern interrupt, possibly a way of breaking through the noise, adding some color, some vibrancy, and possibly some emotion to that email subject line. So typically, your email subject line is one of the first places that obviously it's the first things people are going to see. So again, your first act is getting them to open the email and diving deeper into it. So if they don't open it, it doesn't grab their attention. It doesn't, again, spark curiosity or kind of drive a specific behavior. You're kind of stuck on arrival. So basically what you want that emoji to do is ideally drive that behavior and help you kind of stand out from the crowd. And thinking, hey, emojis aren't those only for kids? Not necessarily. So like you can think basically, hey, um, society's changed a lot over the last like 10, 15 years. Emojis are becoming a lot more commonplace. I think the Webster English Dictionary word of the year was a crying face emoji a few years ago. They're becoming very, very commonplace. Your dad, who's over 50, probably uses the poop emoji more than once a week. So think about that. Yeah, but they're becoming more and more common, and they can really do a great job of conveying emotions, helping to stand out, and helping to kind of like build a narrative story around them. They also have some challenges and some things that again, you want to make sure that they're going to be used in the right ways. And thinking that, hey, your subject line's the first piece of information somebody has to dive in, you want to make sure you're putting the best foot forward or the right foot forward. So thinking about some of the pros and cons of emojis in email subject lines. Thinking emojis, they like the biggest thing they can do, hopefully increase your open rates. So basically getting more people to open the email, getting that foot in the door, and ideally getting them to dive deeper and take an action. So like some research has said like up to 56% of people will open an email in terms of that includes an emoji. Some of those brands are going to be a little bit more successful than others. But again, it does, if used well, used correctly, not overused, it's going to hopefully get you in, again, a foot in the door where somebody's going to be able to dive in. In some cases, it can save space. If emoji is going to convey a word or behavior or XYZ in in the place of a word that may take up a lot more space, that's a great way to use it. Like if you're spelling out a country, like best new XYZ from blank, a flag is a lot easier way in some cases than a than a word for saving space and understanding, hey, we've probably got about 30 characters in a lot of cases in terms of like understanding who's going to open on mobile. So thinking about, we've got basically 30 characters that we need to be able to leverage to convey somebody's attention. Emoji is going to compress that down to a lot smaller space and make it a lot easier for us. It's also going to be able to convey a lot more emotions. This is one of the reasons emojis are being used more in society in general, is they help to convey emotions. This is one of the best parts about emojis, is they really help us frame our ideas, our behaviors. And as people are moving into more text-based communications, like through our mobile devices and everyday use, those emojis are becoming more and more commonplace and helping us convey how we're feeling, what we want, what we like, what we don't, or having some irreverent like humor in our days. So those are the reasons that it's really easy for those who convey emotions and kind of hope like build a connection between our business and our audience. One of the last reasons is they can, again, like we said earlier, stand out in an inbox. This is where you're really trying to find a way to have something that's more engaging, more exciting, draws attention better than everybody else in someone's inbox. An average person receives a lot of emails every day. If this is a pattern interrupt that gets them to actually take an action, this is going to be something that is going to be a really valuable tool in your bucket of resources to get again, people to open those emails and to take an action, especially if like attention is really required, if it's time sensitive, if these are going to be things that really you need people to open at a specific reasonable time. This is a fast way of grabbing their attention. So some of the cons. This is again where people get a little bit scared, and like I'm gonna walk you through why it's gonna be okay. Some of the cons of these, they can convey the wrong tone. If used inappropriately, they may convey the wrong tone. You want to understand the tone and like basically what you're trying to convey, what's going to be in the voice, what the goal outcome of it is, and if it doesn't capture the right tone of what you're trying to convey, it's not necessarily going to hit the mark. If it's something serious or something a little bit more formal or a little bit requires a little bit more reverence, then it may not be the right time to do that, and maybe avoid an emoji in that case. It can rub some people the wrong way. Again, understanding your audience is going to be really important here, and understanding, hey, does our audience just not like these emojis? Do they feel heavy-handed? Are we trying to force them? And do they even understand what they mean? Especially if it's a little bit older audience in some cases, they may not necessarily understand all the cultural context around those emojis. We may be using the wrong emoji. This is a place where I've seen some businesses and brands fall into, is an emoji has been used in some different cultural context they don't necessarily understand. If this emoji's been co-opted by some different group that has kind of taken it and ran with it and kind of made it mean something that it may not necessarily originally mean, then yeah, we kind of want to stay away from those. If there's a little bit of a loaded cultural connotation around it, we want to kind of sidestep that and hopefully not be using something that's going to have a little bit, again, loaded terms. If our audience demographics don't necessarily match the use of that emoji, again, an older audience, in some cases, even a B2B audience too, may not necessarily have that same level of reverence for those emojis being used. So understanding, hey, is this going to fit the context? Is this going to fit the tone? And in a lot of cases, like, would I do this as a human if I'm talking to a customer as a one-to-one interaction? And then one of the last things is there going to be a potential rendering issue? So knowing that, hey, every different email service provider and every different email client is not going to necessarily render those emojis just the same way. Just the same way that a iPhone is not going to view an emoji the exact same as an Android phone. It may look different on Twitter, on Facebook. It's going to look really different across a lot of different platforms. The average emoji takes about 18 months to develop from like beginning to end, and the approval process is crazy because that emoji has to go through all these different layers to actually get approved. So it has to work on Facebook, on Twitter, on Outlook, on Microsoft, on Apple. It really has to work everywhere. And so understanding, hey, these may not render exactly the same everywhere. So making sure that those are going to render smoothly, and testing and understanding how those are going to work is going to help you understand, hey, maybe I shouldn't use these because like a lot of my audience is on Outlook, and this doesn't necessarily look great on Outlook all the time. First off, I'm sorry if all your audience is on Outlook. It's a challenging platform to be working with. Maybe you're in the B2B space, but understanding, hey, this may not render smooth all the time. So one of the next things we get frequently is, hey, like, we're trying these emojis. Like, how do I know if emojis are working? How do I know if they're working for me? And how do I know if it's driving the effective behavior? And my answer to that is, like it is pretty much to everything, like, you got to test it. Test these, and then test it again. Understanding, hey, let's not be too heavy-handed in the way we use these. Again, it can come across as spammy, come across as, like, again, kind of a red flag, but let's test this. And the place I love testing the most is understanding, hey, let's test these in our email automations. If we have automations that are sending very consistently, we can add an emoji to one and not the other, and we get a really distinct test of, hey, is this working? Is this driving the behavior we want it to drive? If it's not, then we can cut it and we can possibly try something else. But this is where we can really start to test and use this as a sandbox to understand, is this working? Is this not? Is this driving the behavior we want? We can do all the A/B testing we want to do. And if you guys are interested in A/B testing, we have an awesome blog post about that. So we'll link that up in the show notes, or you can put it right here. And that's a really great way to understand, hey, how should I be testing? When should I be testing? And what are some of the strategies for doing that? But testing these emojis to make sure that they're going to drive the behavior we want to see from them, and then having some fun with it and exploring and experimenting. So what are some of the one of the other questions is, what are some of the emojis we should avoid using? First one, the ones that don't make sense. So if it doesn't make any contextual sense inside the email, or again in that subject line, don't use it. It's not going to add any value. Thinking about this in terms of that like Coco Chanel rule, like put on everything and then take one thing back. If it's not adding any value, or it's just like a little bit extra where you're trying to force it, don't, pull it back. Pull it back. Let's rein it in. If it's not adding value, doesn't make sense, don't use it. Again, we talked about multiple meanings. This is where, again, if it has a certain multiple social context or cultural context, you really need to be ahead of that before you're doing it. If you're using an emoji and you're like, maybe I should check this, yeah, look it up. You can search it, see how it's being used, how it's being used in culture. If you really want to see, like Twitter is a great example, is a great place to see, hey, how is this emoji being used? Is it being used in different ways that I don't necessarily like? Dive into that. There's some that have been, this has happened for, so you just want to avoid those. New or novel or niche emojis, like emojis do take some time to go through the emoji approval process. Not every platform, not every operating system is going to accept all those emojis right out of the gate. So new emojis sometimes render differently, or just get that like random square box or square box with a question mark in there. So thinking that, hey, this is a brand new emoji, maybe I shouldn't use it right out of the gate. Thinking, give it some time to marinate and go through all the different systems. Let everybody who's using your products, who's going to be opening your emails, update their iOS or update their system, so all those new emojis are added. But something that's brand new, it's a little bit of a risk out of the gate. Emojis that you should avoid using also, I there's unless it's necessary for your brand, or you're trying to convey a specific intent, I would just default towards the generic skin tone, being inclusive, not wanting to alienate anybody in your audience. That's just like it's it's an easy default. I used to, again, manage social for a large university, so we represented a lot of different people, and from there we used the generic skin tone as a default, just because, again, we're representing a broad group. We want to be inclusive of our audience, and unless that's going to be necessarily like, unless that's part of your brand or part of like the story of your brand, um, that's I just default towards generic. Examples of good and bad emojis being used. So we're going to walk through a few of these. And again, this is just kind of like generic, pretty simple, pretty easy, and just ways to use them in context so it's going to make sense, and kind of how you can think about these a little bit differently. So good. Um, Not leaning too heavily on them and understanding, hey, a little bit goes a long way. Like this is it's like salt. If you add too much of it, like a little bit of it, add some flavor and some excitement to your food. Or actually, if I go back, emojis are kind of like, I learned that I um, heard this analogy recently, and I think it's like one of the best I've heard in a while. Emojis are kind of like hot sauce. If it's if you add a little bit of it, it adds flavor and complexity and excitement to it. If you add too much of it, it just overpowers everything and kind of alienates everybody. It just may not be necessarily something you want to add to everything, and too much of it is going to be too much. So again, be intentional when you're using them. Don't use too many of them. Don't force it. And again, you don't want to put too much hot sauce on anything. So you don't, kind of the same way with emojis. You don't want to put too many emojis on anything either. Understand the contextual timing of them in terms of good use. The groups that do this well are going to be it's going to be successful, and it's going to make sense. So when I say contextual timing, those are things that are like really relevant in terms of the time of year or like the holidays. So times of the year, like around Valentine's Day, you may see a lot more hearts or a lot more roses. Those are going to be emojis that pop up a lot more frequently. If it's summer, you may see a lot more suns, or a lot more beaches, or a lot more faces with sunglasses. Those are things that are going to be happening in the, again, relevant timing wise. And again, the face with sunglasses and the sun and the beach with an umbrella is not going to be as relevant in the winter, when again, cold emoji or a snowman emoji may be very, very much more relevant. So relevant to the topic. Does it express the behavior you want to see? So again, does it kind of like drive towards that behavior? or does it drive towards the outcome you want to see from it? So like a point, like don't miss this or check this out. The arrow with the finger may be an easy way to do that. The lock button, like unlock your free prize inside, XYZ. Those are things that are going to help to kind of like convey those ideas. The play button, in terms of like if you want somebody to dive in and watch a video, or like the sneak preview, the eyeballs for like a sneak preview, showing some exclusivity, diving behind the scenes, kind of going behind the curtain a little bit, if you will, and having some fun with it. Um, if your brand does have a little bit more irreverent voice, having some fun with those irreverent emojis, this gives you a little bit more free reign. If you have one of those brands like a Chubbies or a like Bird Dogs, where they do have like that's part of their brand is being irreverent, you can get away with a little bit more there. Some other contextual uses of it, like clocks, for in terms of, again, like urgency, like time sensitive offers, faces with excitement, like celebration, like excitement, like star eyes. Those are easy to use. Like I said, holidays, like a pumpkin, a tree. All of those things are going to be easy to use around the holidays. Or surprise, like that mind blown emoji, that like hands on the face. All of those are going to be relevant at different times. And if you can kind of like use those to convey those emotions or convey that context, that those really help. Also, some businesses and brands, if they do have like a mascot or something along those lines, they'll use the same emojis over and over and over, and they can just kind of include that in a lot of things because, hey, that's like part of their brand and it kind of conveys that. So again, when I was the director of social for Clemson, we used the tiger emoji very frequently, or the tiger paws emoji, or like the pause walking emoji very frequently. And it made sense because, hey, our mascot was the Tigers. So if you have something like that, or that's part of your brand, then that makes perfect sense. Like if you're a brand that like sells baby clothing, maybe you can use baby more often. That may be something good for you. See a lot of groups with like country or origin specific audiences. If I'm a travel company about like visiting Iceland, I may use the Icelandic flag. Using those country flags is a really great way to incorporate some, again, a country into it, add a little bit of vibrancy. If there's a new like coffee from XYZ country, it may kind of like add a little bit of unique flair to it. Don't use those if there's like a country that is not easily recognizable. Kind of lean on some of the more recognizable countries unless you use it over and over, or you are a brand or an organization that focuses just on one country. If you visit Iceland, you can use the Icelandic flag and people are probably going to figure out what that means because it's so contextual and relevant. Some other examples of emojis doing really well and grabbing attention, like like uh, a red circle says attention. Dropbox did a really great job here. Like again, your Dropbox has stopped thinking, like that grabs my attention really quickly. Looks rare with eyeballs. Groceries apparel did a really great job kind of grabbing attention here. Drum roll, please, a new release that gets attention, kind of like conveys some type of behavior. And then have you tried our berry bestseller? That's it with some blueberries behind it, like for Magic Spoon. Those are really easy to kind of like understand the context of what they're trying to convey, and it adds a little bit on top. So in those cases, those are hot sauce. Not too much hot sauce, but just enough. Um, okay, so another thing we get frequently is when should you avoid using emojis? Okay, so this is where, again, understanding the tone and context of what you're trying to convey. So if your brand is a like again around a like specific group holding sensitive data or sensitive information, you may want to lean away from using too many emojis. So like if I'm a doctor or some type of medical care provider, like um, your test results are in, like nervous emoji, that may not necessarily be the most accurate or most helpful use of that emoji. Or hey, important updates on your credit score, like volcano, like volcano chart pointing down, that's probably not going to help anybody or convey the information you want it to do. So understanding, hey, if I'm a group that needs a little bit more reverence or a little bit less flex or a little bit like, more candor around, those things may be helpful to just kind of avoid or not use as much. Um, some types of businesses or organizations may see them just as a little bit less professional. So if you're in a little bit more buttoned up, a little bit more straight laced industry, those may not be as valuable or as helpful in those contexts. So understand, hey, is this going to be valuable, helpful? And again, testing and experimenting is going to be how you can definitively define if your audience is going to not react well to these. So understanding how to use them and when you're using them again. And if you think about if it's a sensitive topic, um, that person may not enjoy a hot sauce, so let's not add hot sauce. It's a little bit too, maybe a little bit too spicy for them. One question people do ask, and this is kind of one of those cons also, do emails trigger a spam folder? If used too heavily, they can. But in a lot of cases, if it's driving the right behavior we want to see, if it's driving more engagement and helping to again and engender and engender your brand to like warm fuzzy feelings, if it's helping to convey the emotion or convey what you're trying to get, like drive the behavior you want to get, then it's going to be viewed by by your again email client as valuable. Like Gmail is going to like it when your email gets engaged with, because again they want people to find value in the service. So understanding, hey, if it's driving the behavior we want it to see, then yes, it's going to be valuable. If you're using them too heavy-handedly or spamming your audience or using them in a way that like in like only emojis all the time or just like heavy-handed with them, that may not necessarily convey the right message or come across the right way. So understanding, yes, I really need to make sure that I can test this, experiment with it. But if it's driving the behavior we want to see, it can be in some ways a really good thing for you. So again, don't be too heavy-handed with it, and just like everything, like take care of your list, make sure your deliverability is going to be good. Um, Other considerations when including emojis, thinking about your audience again, like we talked about, like young, old, male, female, B2B, B2C. All those things are something that you want to be aware of when you're messaging your audience. Like again, a younger demographic may be a little bit more comfortable with more emojis in there. So those are going to be something that's going to be relevant and helpful for you to understand. The different They're going to read differently and view differently on different devices. So understanding, hey, if majority of my audience opens on a mobile device, I need to think about it as in terms of mobile device use and how they're going to be again used. The relevancy of those emojis is going to be really, really important all the time. Am I using the right emoji at the right time for the right message? And is it going to be hopefully kind of like enhancing what I'm doing already? And then is the using those in moderation, like we talked about with hot sauce, not too much all the time, maybe a little bit more for something that requires a little bit more, but not too much, because again, we can get a little bit too heavy handed with it too fast. So in here, also going to include some of our favorite emojis. Um, my these are my personal favorites, and hopefully you guys got some good stuff out of this. Enjoyed doing this, enjoyed walking through it. If you have any questions or you have any suggestions or anything that I missed, any glaring holes, poke some holes. Help me poke some holes, guys. So let me know if you have questions. Send some feedback if you have some holes to poke. You can give me a comment below. Not gonna hurt my feelings. So hopefully this was helpful, hopefully valuable, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye bye.